Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everybody. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It is June 18th, 2014. I am your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, exposing the nature of reality for the true and false nature of what it is. And today we will be having pilot extraordinaire, UFO, and alien whistleblower, and 9/11 truther John Lear on the show. Let me start off by saying that, first of all, it looks like John is in the queue here, area code 702. I will be covering news until 10 after the hour at the latest. Let me start off by saying, though, on that recent documentary that was recently uploaded to the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel, Top 10 UFO Whistleblowers of All Time, John Lear finished dead last at number 10. I must say, I think that was really out of place, and I'm sure John, well, he probably wouldn't let it bother him, but he probably couldn't help but be a little disturbed that they would put him dead last there. That was totally out of place. He deserves to be higher on that list. We'll be talking about UFOs and aliens for sure, but first we're going to talk about 9/11 because John has actually opened up a little bit of a can of worms with the things he's talking about 9/11, and I do want to address that with him because many questions remain unanswered about 9/11 to this day, and John is one of those people who's got the guts to go where other 9/11 truthers fear to tread. Bless his heart for that one. But first, we will cover the news courtesy of Alex Jones and company at InfoWars. First article here, nuclear workers. Government waiting for us to die to avoid medical costs. Nuclear workers join list of sick government employees left to die. Yes, the government doesn't care about us at all. They don't necessarily want us dead. You have to understand at least half of the New World Order factions do not want to depopulate the Earth. That at least half that does not want to depopulate the Earth would rather microchip the Earth and then take away the free will of humanity, or should I say make the free will of humanity totally malevolent so they can turn humanity into a cosmic war machine to further their galactic empire. And the Star Wars Galactic Empire is in-your-face disclosure about this, by the way, in the movies. It's amazing how much fictional stuff in movies is actually fiction based on truth. But I could certainly imagine that nuclear workers would be one of those people that the government would want dead because they don't care about them. I mean, it's easy to kill them because they work around nuclear stuff. I mean, nuclear plants nowadays are totally out of shape. InfoWars has covered that in great detail, how nuclear plants are in bad shape. And if the government wanted to kill nuclear workers, it's a piece of cake. Just sabotage a nuclear plant, and then they and everybody else around them is dead. All right, but I'm not sure that's what this article's about anyway, but moving on. Next article, high school blocks access to conservative, pro-gun, but not liberal websites. Students are not allowed to visit Second Amendment sites, but are free to visit Moms Demand Action and Planned Parenthood. Well, Planned Parenthood. I have said I am indifferent towards abortions. I mean, I would rather a woman not get one, but if she's willing to get one, I'm not going to be against her because she wants to get one. But I still understand that Planned Parenthood is about eugenics made by those New World Order factions who do want to depopulate the Earth. And but anyway, the point of this article is saying students are not allowed to visit Second Amendment sites, sites that support gun rights. If we lose the Second Amendment, we lose everything. ET contactee Alex Collier even said that his ET contacts, the Andromedans, have told him to tell humanity that if we lose the Second Amendment right to bear arms, then we lose everything because the right to bear arms protects us from tyrannical government. That's why the Founding Fathers put it in there. And if we lose it and we lose right to bear arms, there goes everything. And how sick it is that Obama said that we could use Australia as the model to justify taking away guns. Australia disarmed everybody after that staged school shooting, and I do emphasize staged school shooting. Was it a school shooting? Okay, I know it was staged, and it happened in Tasmania, but Alex Jones has said many times on his show, as of other conspiracy theorists, or should I say theoretical conspiracists, or whatever phrase you want to use, it is a conspiracy fact. That was a staged shooting in Tasmania meant to justify disarming everyone, as was Sandy Hook in America. And, all right, folks, get guns. Unless you don't believe in using violence to escalate violence, you're better off with having a gun. Those that don't want to use violence at all, maybe don't get one, don't get a gun, but still acknowledge that everybody needs to have guns if they want to have guns to protect themselves from tyrants in government. All right, next article here. It's a red link. Caught red-handed. Border Patrol paying to ship illegals deep into U.S. Exclusive. Federal government works to keep illegals inside U.S. while passing the cost to American taxpayers. Well, this whole thing about shipping illegals into the country, all about taking our jobs so these illegals will work for for a much smaller salary. They'll say, I'll work for $3 an hour or something. The employers won't even do a background check on them because they agree to work for so little money, and they'll take the jobs of everybody else. And the government, even if these illegals don't have anybody to house them when they cross the border, that's okay because the government will house them. And InfoWars has been doing a lot of reporting on that recently about how the illegals are getting special treatment and the government is picking them up. And when is immigration illegal? I mean, isn't it common right to be able to cross borders without government permission? Well, it should be, but unfortunately people are so paranoid that they will demand the government make it illegal to cross the border without filing some sort of paperwork. How disappointing. All right, moving on, next article. Real Benghazi story ignored as Hillary Clinton flip-flops on anti-Islam video. Compound attack directly connected to CIA arms up to Syria from Libya. Hillary Clinton, we all remember her despicable, what difference does it make comments in front of Congress. Obviously played a role in staging Benghazi. It was all a set up to make sure the ambassador didn't stop the U.S. from shipping arms to Al-Qaeda, which the U.S. government publicly runs. And it shouldn't come as too much of an astonishment that Hillary would have a what difference does it make attitude, and she would also help stage Benghazi. She's an Illuminati grand dame and a Satanist, and she's also a shape-shifting reptilian alien. And, yeah, she has evil on the mind. Watch her eyes closely. You'll notice her eyes never change appearance no matter what her emotion is. That's how you can spot a reptilian alien, by the way. All right, next article here. Exclusive. ICE agent blows the whistle on contagious disease coming across border. And actually, the next article, which is red-linked, is about the same story. It says, ICE agent blows the whistle. Illegals receiving costly taxpayer-funded medical treatments. The medical benefits these people are being given is pretty far out, considering we have people here at home that need help. The illegals, well, so they can take our jobs to screw the rest of us over and put us out of business so we become impoverished. Yeah, people, wake up. I mean, say what you want about how illegals should, and I do emphasize should, have the right to cross a border without government permission. The people created the government, so we don't need permission to cross the borders, no matter what government is of the country it is that we're crossing into. But I don't know, it's a tough subject. People want immigration to be illegal in some regards, as I said earlier, but people need to understand it is designed to screw us over. So as long as people remain in the dark about that, we could be asking for trouble. All right, two more articles here before I get John on. Ron Paul's School of 1776 to counter Common Core indoctrination. Federally imposed educational standards to eviscerate critical thinking. Yes, the public schools and also many non-public schools, by the way, are designed to brainwash and indoctrinate and imprison kids, not educate them. A lot of the stuff you learn in school, as interesting as some of it might be, serves absolutely no purpose in real life. It's just memorization of facts and regurgitating it on paper. Totally left brain there. You got to balance the left and the right brain out, people. Ron Paul, bless him for making this so-called School of 1776. He should be our president, victimized by massive voter fraud, which kept him from winning the Republican primary. And he would have kicked Obama's ass had he been on the presidential ballot. He should be our president. Maybe in some other timeline that's going on right now, he is the president, as he rightfully should be. But anyway, bless his heart for trying to make a more appropriate educational system. I mean, some people say children should be out playing and having fun and not going to school. I don't know. Some might debate, well, maybe we should have schools, but they should definitely not teach the stuff that our current schools teach. Maybe period 1, conspiracy theory. Period 2, metaphysics. Period 3, nature, or learning to love nature. I don't know. Totally, I don't know. I just made that up. But regardless of what you think about whether or not kids should have some sort of a schooling education system, current schooling system we have is the worst, and homeschooling is the way to go. All right, last article here. Riot-controlled drone to shoot pepper spray bullets at protesters. Experts slam technology, deeply disturbing, will maim and kill. Yes, the drones are not there to catch Al-Qaeda, which the U.S. government publicly runs, as I said before. They are there to harass us, intimidate us, keep us in a state of fear and suppress consciousness, and kill us if the government views us as a threat, which they would certainly do to whistleblowers. How disgusting. Okay, but that's it. I believe this is John. Let's see if we can get him on the air here. Area code 702. Is this John Lear?
Yeah, it is, Andrew.
How you doing? I'm glad to talk to you, man. Well, this show, one thing I take very seriously on this show is exposing contradictory statements, because I'm the kind of guy that if I hear two different people or maybe even more than two people in the same field of research say something that's contradictory or goes against what other people have said, the first thing that's going to happen is an alarm bell goes off in my head saying, aha, there's a contradiction. And, well, John, I hope you're prepared because there are a few cans of worms that you've opened in your research. And I've watched many of your videos, all your Project Camelot interviews, by the way, and everything. And there are some things that you said that obviously need to be addressed. And I would like to start with 9/11. And let me start off by making a little bit of a disclaimer here of sorts that Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis has said that at its most complex level, 9/11 was a massive timeline incursion. What he meant by that was many good timelines and bad timelines were coming together in an all-out war, and even though it was unavoidable that 9/11 would happen, all the benevolent timelines managed to make it obvious that 9/11 was staged, well, obvious to the people who are not sheeple, that anyway, and as a result of that, we got 10 years of fear and the birth of a truth movement, and Andrew Bartzis has made some astonishing claims about 9/11. Among other things, he said that the fact that it was a timeline incursion implies that in some timelines, well, in most timelines, including the main organic timeline, the planes were holographic, which I will be talking about with you in a second. But he did say that in some of the alternate timelines undergoing incursion, the planes were actually real planes, as crazy as that may sound. And it can certainly be believable that 9/11 was a massive timeline incursion because there is some evidence of that. Among other things, there's evidence that Flight 93 was shot down, but there's also evidence that Flight 93 landed in Cleveland. The second edition of the Loose Change series does actually talk about that, by the way. So, of course, 9/11 truthers won't talk about this because it's way too out, but the point is the real true answer to the question of what happened on 9/11, the one appropriate answer to that question is it depends on the timeline. But for the purposes of this conversation, I want to address the issue of holographic planes. Because you talked about, well, you gave the evidence for it, that the planes were holographic. But one thing that you said that was kind of questionable was that the planes were projected from some sort of projector in the sky. Some other researchers, like Alfred Weber of Exopolitics TV, talked about how the planes were actually UFOs, which could masquerade using the holographic mask of a plane, and he said that the bulge under the plane that hit the South Tower was the evidence that it was actually such a UFO. And another thing in the conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura episode on 9/11, one thing they did talk about was how they found black boxes in the World Trade Center. One might think, well, maybe those were the black boxes of the UFO that was holographically masked as a plane, but others might think, no, maybe those were real plain black boxes that came from those real planes that were in some of the alternate timelines that Andrew Bartzis talked about. So, John, for the purposes of this conversation, I'd like to discuss why do you believe that it was planes that were projected and not planes that were masked, UFOs that were masked as a plane like some other people have said?
Well, holographic technology, it's difficult to say that it was projected. It certainly appeared. When you say projected, it's like you had to have something to project against. But the holographic technology that we have has been going for 40 years now, and it's so advanced that they can put planes in the air with the sound and the smoke and the everything else, and make it absolutely believable to people who are watching it.
Okay, one other thing I want to talk about is the direct energy weapon taking down the Twin Towers. Because in your Project Camelot interview, you did say that it was a death ray on a space-based platform in Earth's orbit. Problem with that is most people say that it was mini nuclear bombs implanted in the building, and other people said that nanothermite was used to sever the building columns so they can carry it off on trucks. That's how the nanothermite was used. But some say it was mini nukes, and Alfred Weber has also asserted that HAARP, the weather modification technology, would have also had to have been used. You couldn't dustify the buildings like that unless you used HAARP and mini nukes. So why do you believe that it was actually a death ray on a space-based platform in Earth's orbit?
Well, just read Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go?, and you'll see that it was a direct energy weapon. Now, she doesn't say it's space-based, but I know that the weapons are up there. There's 24 orbiting satellites, all weaponized, and they use this molecular dissociation technology, which dissociates the makeup, the molecular makeup of steel and concrete and whatever, into little balls of dust about 80 microns in diameter, and that's what was floating around Manhattan. All that dust there was the concrete and the steel disintegrating. Now, if you took a demolition, the regular type of demolition, and tried to do that with the Twin Towers, you would have 13%, or about 13 stories, 14 stories remaining there, because that's basically how much is left. But in this case, since molecular dissociation was used, there was only one story at the most left. As far as the thermite or thermate or whatever, there would just be too many tons of it required to do that kind of damage. As far as nuclear bombs, there was no evidence of any kind of nuclear weapons used, and nuclear weapons would not disintegrate to the extent that all of that was done. It just couldn't happen with nuclear weapons. Now, when they first tried this weapon, they used the Murat Tower, or the Murat building in Oklahoma City. And if you look at the pictures of the damage of the Twin Towers, or the Twin Towers in New York, and compare it with the Murat building, they're almost identical. What happened was that in New York, that was the first time they used this weapon at full power, and they didn't realize that the weapon that they were using was non-self-quenching. In other words, once they set it off and things started disintegrating, it didn't stop. Even though that they turned the weapon off, the disintegration kept going on. That's why there is a reflecting pool in right where the Twin Towers was, because when they tried to rebuild the towers, it would kept instantaneously rusting, and they couldn't do it. So what they did is they built a reflecting pool there, and then built the buildings around it.
Okay, and where's the evidence that shows that World Trade Center Building 7 was also taken down by a direct energy weapon? Because some say, well, it was just a regular controlled demolition. That is like most controlled demolitions. I mean, just looking at a collapse, it's obviously controlled demolition, but it's really hard to deduce whether or not a direct energy weapon was used to take it down. Is there any evidence that a direct energy weapon was used to take down Building 7? And if so, can you explain it?
Only the fact that there was, nothing left of the building number 7. Now, what happened in building number 7 is that was supposed to go off at 11 o'clock, and that was Flight 93. They were going to do the same holographic projection, but apparently something went wrong, and they couldn't use that. So they had between 11 o'clock when it was supposed to, the holographic image was supposed to hit the Building 7, and 5 o'clock when they finally let the press into, what was the name of that place down in Pennsylvania?
Somerville? Is that right?
No, the...
Somerset.
Anyway, where 93 supposedly crashed,
they
had 6 hours to prepare for it. And what they did is, since they couldn't, something happened that they couldn't use this holographic projection. So they had 6 hours to go down to Pennsylvania, find a hole in the ground, scatter some parts there, have people stand around in hazmat suits, and then let the press in to say, yeah, here it is. But it's impossible. There's not enough no plane parts, as a matter of fact, left there. And the ACARS unit, the ACARS is the unit in the airplane which transmits information back to the company and to Boeing, with all kinds of information about the airplane and also to the company, and information on weather and stuff, and that was still transmitting 4 hours later. So that airplane was still flying 4 hours later.
Oh, okay. And this whole thing about
Shanksville is the name.
Shanksville. Yeah, I live near an area called Somerset. That's why it was popping into my mind for some reason. But anyway, the thing about Flight 93 hitting Building 7, are you hypothesizing that, or do you have enough evidence to suggest that that was what they were planning to do before a malfunction caused that to be impossible?
That's the only thing that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So we'll just leave it at that. But in regards to
the Pentagon was a flyover, and what happened is whoever was flying that airplane flew to the north of the Sitco station, and just as it became a beam, the Pentagon, they set off a normal explosion, C4 or whatever they had, to make that hole in the building. Now, April Gallup was sitting 40 feet away from that demolition, and she had her 6-month-old son in his baby seat below her desk, and she had just come to work. She picked him up after the explosion stopped, picked him up, threw him over her shoulder, and walked through that hole out onto the grass for triage treatment. And she said she didn't see any airplane. There was no drones. There was no rockets. There was no missiles. There was no fuel, no odor of fuel or diesel or jet fuel or anything like that. It was just a plain old explosion. And she went out on the grass, and the Army intelligence got a hold of her and tried to make her say that she saw an airplane. She said, "No, I didn't." And she's held to that story for 10 years now.
Okay, but question about the Pentagon. Well, first of all, Barbara Honninger did a presentation in early 2013 talking about how she believes that it was a drone that was painted to look like an American Airlines plane, and a helicopter flying in the vicinity shot that drone down, and that's why there was some wreckage that appeared to look like an American Airlines scrap there. And she also talked about how the evidence for that is that a clock was stopped in a building near the Pentagon at the same time that the explosion from the helicopter to the drone supposedly happened. But for the purposes of the Pentagon, I'm really interested in knowing, how do you know for a fact that it was a flyover? How do you know for a fact that the plane that allegedly hit the Pentagon was not also a hologram? And also, one other question, is there enough evidence to suggest that a missile was a bomb that hit the Pentagon?
No, April Gallup saw none of that. The evidence I have for an airplane is the fact that the flight recorder was released to the public, and that recorder records 156 parameters of the airplane, aileron displacement, throttle displacement, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things it records is the altitude. And whoever was faking the data on the recorder didn't realize that on altitude the recorder records at 29.92 inches of mercury. And what happens during an accident, the pressure by which you determine what altitude the airplane is at is always different. So what they did is they just took a standard 2992 inches of mercury, and then what they do is after an accident, they take that and they take the real pressure. In this case, it was from Ronald Reagan National Airport, and that was 30.22 inches of mercury. And what they didn't realize is the people who said that it crashed it into the Pentagon, they only had 80 feet there as the altitude. Well, actually, if you take the difference between 30.22 and 2992, there's 400 feet there that they didn't know about because they just weren't smart enough to know how to fake that data. So the airplane flew over at 400 feet.
Okay. I could certainly believe that, because I assumed it was a hologram of a plane that hit the Pentagon, but now you told me no, it was in fact a flyover. They would have easily pulled that off, because in the documentary on YouTube called Pentagon Smoking Gun Version, they did explain how if they flew the plane over the Pentagon, there's nothing on the other side of the Pentagon that would have enabled anyone to see the flyover happening. It's just the river, and on the other side there's like virtually nothing. So they would have easily been able to pull that off, flying the plane over the Pentagon as it hit it. But I think that's enough about 9/11 for now. Now I want to get into the really good stuff about aliens and UFOs, and I might as well start off with a bang by talking about Bob Lazar. First of all, I did interview Stanton Friedman on my show. He asserts that while he thinks Bob Lazar is a brilliant man, he asserts he's not telling the truth. I'm not going to talk about what Stanton said in regards to Bob having his records taken away and everything like that, but the thing that really stood out, Stanton told me that element 115, the half-life of it is just too short. It would disintegrate and decay in a heartbeat before the extraterrestrials could do anything with it. However, when I had ancient astronaut theorist Jason Martell on my show, he told me that Stanton Friedman has a conflict of interest with the work of Bob Lazar. And I also had Bill Burns on my show, and he said, well, Stanton's a nuclear physicist. I am not, but I still beg to differ with what he's saying. And he talked about how element 115 was able to freeze time, so to speak, in regards to a candle experiment. But can you assert that, or debunk Stanton Friedman, for lack of a better phrase, that he is wrong and that Bob Lazar truly is genuine?
Absolutely. One thing Stan Friedman has always been saying, he was a nuclear physicist. He has a degree, but he never worked as a nuclear physicist. The other thing is, he time after time, he would say that he talked to Bob Lazar, and Bob couldn't even answer the simplest physics question. So we said, what was the question? And we've never been able to get him to answer that. But yes, Bob is the real thing. As far as element 115, what the government produced was, there's various types of 115 depending on how many isotopes are produced, and the little time that the government had to produce that, it only had one isotope. What Bob had more isotopes than that, and could only occur from a solar system that was much bigger than this one, hundreds of times bigger than this one, and that's the only way that the 115 could occur naturally. You can't make that stuff.
Okay, Bob Lazar also talked about how the gray aliens from Zeta Reticuli that he talked about worked at the S4 location, which is not, it is part of Area 51, but it's not at Area 51. It's at a remote location. One thing that stood out, he said that those gray aliens, they helped bring religions to planet Earth in order to keep the human race from destroying itself. Now, that's kind of interesting because other sources have talked about how religions were created by the Illuminati centuries ago in order to suppress human consciousness by making us think we need to worship a higher power, when in reality we are infinite consciousness. And so I'm a little confused. Why would Bob assert that religions were brought here for good purposes and not like what other people say?
That was part of the disinformation he was reading. Some of it was true, some of it wasn't. The aliens made us hundreds and millions of years ago, and they have made different types of mankind. They're on the planet Earth. It's not 5 billion years old, it's like 14 billion years old, and there's been many civilizations, most of them much more developed than we are now. And when they get through with a particular program, after they take everybody off and send them somewhere else, what they do is they mix everything up, change the mountains around, change the deserts around. Under the Sahara Desert, there's probably fantastic remnants of civilizations there. Under the Atlantic Ocean, they keep finding more and more evidence of civilizations there. They keep finding over in Japan pyramids all over the place, and there is, has been more civilizations than we can imagine on the planet Earth. As far as religion, yes, they did concoct that so that we wouldn't hurt ourselves while we were developing. Of course, it didn't work out exactly that way.
Okay, another thing about the Greys that you said that was really intriguing was you said that it is the Grey aliens in your Project Camelot interview that seem to have most of an influence on the lives of humanity. Now, Alex Collier, ET contactee, says that in terms of malevolent aliens on Earth, there is a hierarchy of sorts. There's the Zeta Reticuli Greys at the bottom, and then one level above that you have Orion Greys, not just Greys, but Greys, another species from Orion, and then above that, at the top of the ladder of the malevolent alien ladder of authority, you have the Alpha Draconian reptilian aliens, and there are other branches of reptilian aliens, like from Sirius B and Hydra, and I think Booties and all, but they're all clone species of reptilian that originate from the Alpha Draconis species, but I don't want to get into a debate of whether it's the Greys or the reptilians that have more of a control over humanity. What I'm interested in is, you said in your Project Camelot interview that the Greys are harvesting humans in containers of sorts. It's interesting how you use the word container. It reminds me of how Bob Lazar said that the Greys view humans as containers. I wonder if there's a correlation there. But what are those humans that are in those containers? What are those container humans used for?
The containers were containers of souls. Is what what Bob read and what he meant, or what they meant. He didn't say specifically souls, but that's what we were containers of. Now the Greys are strictly cybernetic organisms. They're robots. They just do the busy work for who's ever running the program. There's hundreds of different aliens, but there's one particular one that made us and is responsible for us. And at this particular time, there's a bad or a not so good alien force that's taken over and made a deal with our government that if we would help them keep the secret, they would give us all kinds of real super fantastic technology, and they don't want us to advance. Now there's the other aliens. The good guys are out there in the back, outside waiting for something to happen so they can come in, and they want us to progress more and give us, free electricity and all that kind of stuff. But right now, with the help of the government, we're not going to know. This is why disclosure will never, ever happen, at least not for 100 years. And when it does come, if it does come before that, it'll be a fake disclosure. I've heard this stuff that they've been passing around about the J-Rod, and the J-Rod is they're trying to make, being the secret government, they're trying to make the J-Rod as if it was a gray alien, and they're using the same figures and height and other, but it's completely different, and it's a scam. It's not real. The J-Rod is a scam, and when supposedly here a couple of years ago, they needed the J-Rod needed our help to do something to his race so that they could continue, and I don't know what happened, but apparently they took him over to Egypt. He got in his vehicle and went off into space, and that was the end of that. So I haven't heard too much about the J-Rod, but it's all a scam when you do hear it.
Okay, one thing about gray aliens again, the treaty. Now, I recently watched an interview that Alfred Weber did with Laura Eisenhower, and Laura talked about how in reality Grace had been the treaty that was allegedly signed with President Eisenhower in the 50s. It actually went a lot earlier than that, during the time of FDR's presidency, and they only got a little bit more serious, for lack of a better phrase, about what they wanted to do on planet Earth. The Greys did, and I'm talking about Orion Greys here, when they signed that treaty with Eisenhower in the 50s. So if you know anything about that treaty with the Orion Greys on planet Earth, can you talk about it? And is Laura Eisenhower right when she says it actually can be dated back all the way to the time of FDR and not just Eisenhower?
It could be back as far as Eisenhower, but the Greys wouldn't be making a treaty themselves. They're just robots. It would be whoever they represent or whoever is in control. Now, they have good aliens and bad aliens, and they can get these Greys to work for them, whether they're good or bad. I don't know how that works, but they can. They're just busy workers, and we, mankind, is abducted when we're born. We get picked up once at 2 years old, once at 4, once at 6, once at 8, once at 10, once at 13, and then only as necessary. But it isn't just a select few, or like 1 in 10 like we used to believe. It's everybody, and at least mankind. Now, on Earth, there's like 30% is actual aliens on Earth, and the rest is just regular mankind.
Okay, one thing I do want to discuss that really changes everything we understand about science that you talked about in your Project Camelot interview. You discussed how every planet has its own consciousness filtering system, which allows for life to exist on the planet regardless of its size, location, or the type of star it orbits. And we're not talking about just life in other dimensions. We're talking if you were to fly from planet Earth in a rocket ship to another planet and land on it, you would find life there. I also remember you saying that the only gas giant in the solar system is NASA. Well, I find that intriguing because other people have said that they back up your claim that every planet has life because it has a consciousness filtering system, but they do assert that Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are gas giants, but they do have the ability to support life because of this filtering system. Now, this is revolutionary because it shows that life could exist everywhere and totally revolutionizes the way we look at science. So where did you hear this thing about every planet has its own consciousness filtering system? Please elaborate on it. Talk about it as much as you want.
Well, conscious filtering system, I'm not sure I agree with that, but first of all, there's 40 planets in our solar system, not 9 as NASA tells us. The way it works is the sun does not transmit heat. When we feel heat standing out in the sun, that's our atmosphere taking the electromagnetic wave that comes out of the sun and modifying it for a certain temperature, for a reasonable temperature. For instance, Pluto, we're told, is cold enough to freeze an Eskimo. It's not. It's the same temperature as Earth, because what they're doing is that the atmosphere of Pluto is modifying the electromagnetic wave that comes out of the sun. Mercury is supposedly hot enough to melt lead. That's not true. It's the same temperature of the Earth. They have a civilization there, just like all the other 40 planets that I'm telling you about. All have civilizations. They all have moons, which have civilizations in themselves. There's so much civilizations in this solar system, it's absolutely unbelievable, and we're just, told that we're the only ones, and Mars, there can't be anybody there because there's not enough air. It's all baloney. Same thing with our moon. We're told that it has 1/6 gravity. That's wrong. Newton's universal law of gravitation was proved wrong by Perry Spolter in her book in 1993, which called The Gravitational Force of the Sun. And she proves that his formula, and actually it's not his formula, M1 times M2 over R squared. Somebody made that after Newton died, and that's been used forever as the bottom line. It's not true. It has nothing to do with it. Density has nothing to do with the size or gravity has nothing to do with the density or size of a planet. So everything that's based on Newton's universal law of gravitation, including Einstein's theory of relativity, both general and special, is wrong, absolutely wrong. It has nothing to do with it. But our moon has 70% the gravity of Earth. That's why the Apollo mission could have never gone, because they wouldn't have had enough fuel. You remember when Aldrin and Armstrong landed, they said that they only had 30 seconds of fuel. Well, if they had 70% gravity, they wouldn't have had enough fuel to even get there, much less land. So there's a civilization on the moon now. It's probably 500 million people. I have pictures, hundreds of pictures of cities, buildings, lakes, just all kinds of stuff on the moon. It just takes, got to look at it. Now, where I got my pictures is in 1965, between 1965 and 1967, NASA sent up the Lunar Orbiter series, a Lockheed camera, that there was 5 of them, and the alleged purpose of that was to find a place suitable for Apollo to land, which it never went, but they did get some good pictures. And the reason that's important is because at that time, NASA really didn't realize how populated the moon was, so they didn't take very good care when they started airbrushing all the stuff out. So I bought all the books I could of the NASA pictures of the moon published before 1970. everything now is digitally sanitized so that you can't find anything. But those pictures before, they're great. I show people some of the stuff, and they said, "Oh my God, I had no idea, that there's so much stuff going on up there."
Okay, and speaking of the moon, I want to talk about that for a bit. I actually this past weekend watched Richard Hoagland's interviews on Project Camelot. He asserted that you are wrong when you say the moon has an atmosphere. He believes there is no atmosphere on the moon. Can you debunk Richard Hoagland on that one, and also confirm the atmosphere of the moon is yellow, as you talked about in your interview on Project Camelot?
Absolutely. The sky is a saffron yellow, and that was told to us by Howard Menger, who went there in 1956 as an invitation to the people that lived there. He became an advisor to the Pentagon after that trip, and they know it. There is a breathable atmosphere. It doesn't go very high, maybe 15,000 feet. People say, well, why couldn't you see it? And the reason is it's not thick enough to see it. If you'll read one of the books on the moon written by Fursoff, he and Harrington did see, in fact, an atmosphere, but it has to be under the right conditions. Hoagland is wrong. There is a breathable atmosphere. The people that live up there breathe normally. It's would be equal to 18,000 feet on Earth. When Menger went in 1956, they would orbit the moon for about a week, decompressing and getting of the ability to be able to breathe, just the same way that when we climb up to Everest, we take it in 5,000-foot steps so that we can accumulate get our breathing system so that it's ready to make the next 5,000 feet. Same thing on the moon. They orbit for a week, gradually acclimatizing ourselves so that when we step out on the moon, that you're used to breathing in 18,000-foot elevation.
Okay, and another thing that you've discussed about the moon, which actually opened up a can of worms in your Project Camelot interview, you said that the moon is, I believe the number was 64% the mass of the Earth. Now, that contradicts a lot of other people. I mean, I've watched some of David Icke's presentations. He subscribes to the obvious true fact that the moon is artificial, but he cites sources that say that the moon is lighter than it should be, and that contradicts your claim that the moon is 64% the mass of the Earth. So how can you stand by your claim that it's 64% the mass of the Earth?
64%. What I said was the gravitational pull is 64% that of Earth.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, and that's been proven. Perry Spalter did the figures for me. She's a great mathematician, and she wrote this book, Gravitational Force of the Sun, which absolutely proves that Newton is wrong. Eisen, who's the they're wrong, and what she did is she worked out the gravitational pull of the moon using the Borealis law of inverse square for July 20th, 1969, the landing of Apollo 11, and it worked out to be 68% of Earth's gravity. So, yeah, they're wrong. Anybody who believes that there's not an atmosphere up there is not acquainted with the facts.
Okay, so the moon is what percent the mass of the Earth, to the best of your knowledge?
Let's see. I think it's the density is 3.34 grams per centimeter cubed, I think it is.
Okay. Now I want to talk about the moon landings, because you did say in your Project Camelot interview that some remote viewers tried to remote view the Sea of Tranquility at the time Apollo 11 was supposed to land there, and they didn't find anything. And many people subscribe to the notion that we did go to the moon, but we got help from extraterrestrials, and most of the video footage, I don't know what exactly I mean by most, but most of the video footage was faked for the purpose of concealing the extraterrestrial cover-up. So what do you know about moon landings being faked or not faked?
It was all faked, as were some of the Mercury shots, some of the Gemini shots, and all the Apollo shots were all faked. Stanley Kubrick was the one that did the moon stuff specifically for NASA, and that's why he hid out the last years of his life. He wouldn't even come out of his house because he was scared he was going to get done in, because everybody who had anything to do with that particular program was eliminated. There's no possibility that we could have gone to the moon. One of the things is the Van Allen belt. Dr. Van Allen set up Explorer 1, 2, and 3 in 1958, 1959. Explorer 1 and 3 sent back data of the Geiger counters in the ship, and they both went off scale and were destroyed because of the intense radiation. Number 2 didn't give any data because it had some kind of a rocket problem. But 1 and 3, Explorers 1 and 3 did give good data. Now we hear NASA say, "Oh well, we flew around it, or we flew in a hole, or some BS like that." But it's not true. That it's possible that we're on the moon now because of all the information we have from the ETs. We could be going there, but we didn't go on July. We didn't. None of the Apollo missions went.
Okay, but are you willing to subscribe to the idea that we did go to the moon with the help of extraterrestrial technology and the video footage was faked?
We didn't go with the help of extraterrestrial technology in the Apollo program. It might have been in the last 20 years, but certainly not 40 years ago.
Okay,
There's too much evidence that it was just a fake. Just all this stuff you see on YouTube, and the astronauts dancing around, only able to jump 12 inches off the surface of the moon. There's just tons of evidence that they didn't go, that they faked it.
Yeah, there is two documentaries on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel that talk about the moon landings being faked. I encourage people to watch those and use your own discernment. But I do have some questions here in the chat room. One of the chat room members is talking about seasons, because talking about how planets have their can support life no matter how far from the sun they are, how big the planets are. Can you explain why planets have seasons, though? Why can't the planet and the sun keep the climate consistent all year round?
Why can't explain that again? I'm trying to follow.
Yeah, planets, even though every planet can support life, because the sun it doesn't radiate heat, it radiates spiritual energy, which allows for the planet to support life. That doesn't really answer the question of why planets have seasons. One might think, well, maybe planet Earth's consciousness filtering system and the sun would enable the planet to have the same climate all year round, but that, of course, doesn't happen. We have seasons, and most people subscribe to the notion that the reason we have seasons is because the axis is tilted, and the tilt is what causes the seasons. So can you explain?
Yeah, I'll go along with that, but I'm not going to go along with your spiritual energy. It's an electromagnetic wave that the sun broadcast. Now, the sun is responsible. It gives birth to all the planets, all the moons, all the satellites, and there's at least 5 different extraterrestrial civilizations that live inside the sun.
Okay, by the way, the thing about the spiritual energy, I actually got that from Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartis, who says you can look at the sun anytime you want. It bypasses the physical and goes right to your brain to activate your pineal gland and such, because it is spiritual energy. And he also said this upcoming weekend, because it's the summer solstice, get out in nature as much as possible and stare at the sun all day long. It won't hurt your eyes. Sun gazing really is a true science, and don't believe that stuff about the 45-minute span of sunrise and sunset. You can do it any time. So do you think Andrew Bartis is somehow wrong? He is an Akashic Records reader, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not going to look at the sun. Maybe you could try it. Hello. Are you there, Andrew? Hello, Andrew. If you're there, I'm not reading you. Hello. Hello, Andrew. Look, I'm going to hang up and give you a chance to dial back in, because I'm not getting anything. I'm going to hang up right now.
John, I'm back. I somehow got kicked off. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Sorry about that. We're going to have to start all over here. Hopefully this won't happen again. It said there was some sort of an internet connection problem. Hope it won't happen, but we got to start all over. I was talking about Andrew Bartz saying spiritual energy is what radiates the sun. That's why you can sun gaze anytime and all. What were you saying about that?
Okay, well, you can sun gaze, Andrew, but I'm gonna pass on that.
Okay, so you don't subscribe to what he says. Okay, I'll go along with that. Another thing I want to talk about in regards to the chat room person here, he wants to know what you know about the Billy Meyer case. Do you believe Billy Meyer is genuine? Talk all you want about this. What do you think about it?
Absolutely, 100%. Now, all the predictions he's made, I'm not sure about that. His connection with some of the prophecies he's made, I'm not sure about that. But the fact that he was picked up by people who represent themselves as the Pleiadians, yes, that happened. Those craft are real. And yes, I believe the Billy Myers case, except for all the prophecies.
Okay, I believe he's genuine too. Speaking of Andrew Bartzis, want to get back to him. He has also made another assertion. You said that there are 40 planets in the solar system. Well, Andrew Bartzis would say that you are off by 26. He says there are actually 66 planets. And another thing about the solar system, some other researchers like Santos Bonacci, and also there's a video on YouTube called Solar System New Interpretation, which says that the solar system is actually shaped like a cone, in which, like, if you were to put a traffic cone on the ground, put the sun at the top of a cone, and then draw a line that goes straight down the middle of the cone from the sun, the planets don't orbit the sun. They actually orbit the pole that would go down from the top of the cone to the ground, and they do at some points during the orbit they are closer to the sun than at others. And Santos Bonacci asserts that the laws of physics would suggest that this is how the solar system is actually shaped. So do you believe the solar system is shaped like a cone, and do you think maybe Andrew Bartzis might be onto something when he says there are actually 66 planets?
No, I don't believe it's shaped like a cone. There may be 66. My information is that it's 40. And when you say the laws of physics, we know so little, and we're finding more and more of the laws we believe to be true are just flat-ass wrong.
All right. Speaking of planets that we don't know about in the solar system, I'm going to have to talk about this for about 3 minutes because this is real. I need to discuss all this. It's very significant, and then I'll give you the chance to give your take on it. But one of those 66 planets, and I know you disagree on this because you flat out admitted in your Contra Chemlot report interview that you don't agree with this. Andrew Bartzis also made a statement that revolutionizes the way we look at human history on planet Earth in one of his interviews, and that statement was, Zecharia Sitchin's first 3 books are very accurate. In other words, yes, there is a Nibiru. Yes, there is a race of Anunnaki that come from Nibiru. Yes, they came to Earth over 450,000 years ago and combined Homo erectus DNA with Anunnaki DNA to create Homo sapien sapien. And yes, they used humans as a slave species to mine gold for them. Bartzis did say that Sitchin was off by about 30,000 years. It was actually 480,000 years ago, not 450,000. He also said the Anunnaki were lured to Earth by other dimensional entities, and he also said that the gold was not used to shield the atmosphere of their planet Nibiru. It was actually used to bring entities back to Earth. And, the question of how the Anunnaki can survive on Nibiru, even though it is so far from the sun, you explained that earlier with when you talked about how any planet can support life. But Bartzis also said that all that stuff about Zecharia Sitchin being a disinfo agent for the CIA and Illuminati, that itself is disinformation. He explained that timeline watcher entities who didn't want people to know that Sitchin's work was accurate implanted that disinformation into our reality by making people think they're on alternate timelines to make them say that Sitchin was a disinfo agent, among other things, and make that whatever you will. I know it sounds crazy, but you did assert that you don't think Nibiru exists. Well, if Andrew Bartzis said something, it must be true, as they might say. So does this change your perspective on the Anunnaki and them coming from Nibiru and Nibiru Anunnaki having a big influence on planet Earth?
No, that's not true.
You don't believe that? Why do you stand by that belief?
Because the Anunnaki didn't have anything to do with that. They would like to think they're a lot more powerful than they are.
Do you know what their true intentions are and what the Anunnaki are?
No, but whatever their true intentions are, they don't have the power to do anything.
Okay, because other people like George Cavazos say that the term Anunnaki actually refers to a
hodgepodge of extraterrestrial races, and the ones that are said to come from Nibiru are said to be one faction that is of a malevolent faction, but not all Anunnaki factions are malevolent. They are said to be the children of a universal geneticist known as Anu, but that's how the theory goes. Make of that whatever you will, but I guess we might as well move on to another subject here, moons that are artificial, because I remember in your Project Camelot interview you showed a picture of a moon that has some sort of a hook on it, which you suggest is used to tow other bodies in space, like maybe even our moon. And when Kerry Cassidy asked you why would they put this out in the open for people to see, you said, well, who's going to believe that a moon is used as a towing device? Could you please talk about that? Which moon was that you were talking about that was a towing device, and what do you think it was used for?
Our moon was towed into orbit. First of all, it was built on Jupiter 38 billion years ago, and it's been towed around the different 40 planets, or how many planets you want to believe there are, doing just what it's doing now. There's people that live on the surface, and the Greys have their laboratories underground. It's towed around the electromagnetic vehicle that Norman Berggren talked about in his book, The Ringmakers of Saturn. I asked him one day, I said, where do you think the EMV is now? And he says, on the far side. So, there is no dark side. It's on the far side. So I began looking for it, and I found it I believe I found it in the crater Tsiolkovsky. And what we've done is NASA has made 8 separate different representations of what's in the middle of Tsiolkovsky. Now, that is definitely the electromagnetic vehicle, but they've tried to make it look like an island, and then it looks like something else, and then it looks like a building, and I put all 8 together. I think they're on thelivingmoon.com, but there are many of those. NASA's tried to camouflage it so that we can't believe or look for the electromagnetic vehicle that towed the moon into orbit this time. And, of course, this time it was brought into orbit about 15,000 years ago. Velikovsky talks about mankind. In the early memory of mankind, there was a time when there was no moons, and there was 2 moons, and then there was 1 moon. I believe that the 2 moons was actually the moon, and the electromagnetic vehicle was so bright that they confused that with another moon. But I believe the EMV is sitting there in the crater Tsiolkovsky, and you can look at any picture of Tsiolkovsky and see what I'm talking about.
Okay. Well, you just gave me another contradiction alert to talk about. You said how the moon was built on Jupiter. Alex Collier talked about how the moon actually came from a planet in a star known as Chalta, which is in the Ursa Minor star system. And as the story goes, the moon was brought here from Chalta as a consciousness seeding mechanism of sorts. But during the fall of Atlantis, right before when the Earth came under the clutches of the reptilian alien Draconian Empire, they stole the moon from the benevolent aliens, trashed it, and then have used it as a matrix creator ever since. So where do you get your evidence that it was invented on Jupiter and didn't come from the Chalta star system in Ursa Minor?
Most of my evidence comes from Lou Baldwin. Lou Baldwin's written 7 books. He came on to AboveTopSecret.com here about 2005, and he has some really, really good information, in my opinion. But anyway, most of my information comes from him. He's the one that said that it came from Jupiter. The stuff that you just told me about Chalta and all that stuff, I think that's all baloney, but I'm not going to go into it.
Yeah, I do like citing ET contactees. I know there's a lot of people out there who are skeptical of that, but I try to keep an open mind and try to use those as sources whenever possible, like exposing contradiction alerts like I just did here. But I guess we might as well talk on to something else. Getting back to moons being artificial, Alex Collier also said that there are 7 moons in our solar system that are artificial. There's our moon, there's Phobos, Ganymede is also one. The one that you talked about, which is a hook device of sorts. Do you by any chance know? And also, Iapetus, Saturn's moon Iapetus, that is so obviously artificial. You can tell because of the equatorial bulge and all. That's 4 moons that I've mentioned, and also the 5th one that you talked about, which is the hooking device. Do you by any chance know which other ones are artificial?
No, I don't know exactly what you mean by artificial. We'll say artificial means it was built somewhere else. So I'm going to say that our moon was built on Jupiter. And what are we talking about, the hook? I'm not sure what you're...
Yeah, what I'm talking on that picture that you showed during your Project Camelot interview, the moon. You talked about a moon that was I think it was a moon in one of the gas giant planets, which are not really gas giants, but the point is they can. The moon of that planet has a hooking thing that looks like a hook or a grappling thing on it, and you said that moon is used as a tugboat of sorts to shepherd other moons and all. Do you by any chance remember that and know which moon that was that you're talking about?
No, I don't remember that. What's hooking on is the electromagnetic vehicle that now is sitting in the crater Tsiolkovsky on our moon.
Okay, maybe
it's a vehicle. It's a towing vehicle.
Okay, maybe that is what I was thinking of. Okay, but want to talk about something here. Area 51. I guess we might as well talk about that because Bill Burns, in my interview with him, he said that exotic technology is no longer at Area 51. They've moved it to other locations. And Akashic Records visitor Andrew Bartz has said that Area 51 wasn't just used for ETs and UFOs. It was also used for government time travel purposes. Can you give any update on the news of how much stuff has been moved from Area 51 to other places and what technology was used there and maybe still is used there?
Well, 20 years ago is where my information was. I used to get a lot of information, but 20 or 25 years ago, all the information was cut off, and I'm not sure why, but I do know that let's see, it's 2014, and this happened in 1990. Everybody started getting lie detector tests every 90 days, and the first question was, do you know John Lear, and have you had any contact with him in the past 90 days? And so that put an end to a lot of the information I was getting. Area 51 was built in 1942 and used as a Navy training center. And at the end of World War II, it was shut down in 1949. The Seabees went in there and started building all the underground stuff for the Roswell and other UFO crashes. In 1955, Lockheed needed a place to test the U-2, so they sent out Fish Salmon and Tony LeVere to find a place, and by accident, I mean just sheer accident, that they also they came upon Groom Lake and picked the west side, just where these underground hangars had been built by the Seabees in 1949, and they built this runway and area to test the U-2. Then it became the testing ground for the SR-71, and then the F-19 and the F-117A, and it was just by sheer accident that they built it right directly on top of all these underground hangars. Now the hangars, they used to go down 6 levels, 7 levels. Now they go down 26 levels. As far as now, 20 years ago, there was 32 air access only facilities like Groom Lake. They're called AOAs, air access only, and meant that you could only get in by air, and they control the security then. What they did is, the same time they built Groom Lake, they built another secret base halfway between the Tonopah Test Range and Groom Lake called Sandia. And Sandia has 2 strips with a hangar in the center of these 2 strips, and the hangars are divided in half so that you can have one complete program flying, and the other program won't see it because they're using the other side, the other runway. Now, in addition to the runways, they have the Sandia underground base, which is on the Paiute Mesa, about 13 miles away from the runway. This base was started in 1980. What they did is they took off the top of a mountain, the Rainier Mesa, and and built this underground facility. There's 5 holes that go down a mile deep. Each one can hold 25,000 fully armed combat troops. And plus there's laboratories and a whole bunch of stuff. And that was finished in 1985 and has been used ever since. What they did is they had a problem because all the people that work up at Tonopah Test Range and Groom Lake were shuttled up there by the 737s, which are bailed by EG&G Special Projects from Hill Air Force Base. And they have about 7 of these 737s. They couldn't get additional 737s because it would give rise to the fact, well, why do they need more 737s? Is there something else going on? So they couldn't use buses or trains because it took too long to get up there. So what they did is they built a high-speed maglev train that has the beginning of it at under Special Projects at McCarran Airport and also under the Luxor Hotel and Casino, and then the tracks go under the Bellagio Hotel and Casino, and then direct up to Sandia. And what happened is now when you go into Special Projects, it's really it's a new, real space age base. They've got doors that huge doors that you can drive limos through, and they're dark lens. It's a really neat kind of deal, but under that, there's a place where you can get transportation or walking transportation over to under the Luxor, and that's where the beginning of the high-speed maglev train is. Now, in 2004, they were working on an addition to the track, which I believe went up to another secret base, which is 40 miles south of the border between Utah and Nevada, not White Sands. What's that? Where they test the high-speed cars? Not Holloman. I can't remember. Anyway, that base has access to, and that's where they fly all the black triangles out of. And so what they did is they built this high-speed maglev train, and in 2004 they were building another track, and somehow they hit the main power grid of the Bellagio Hotel Casino. This was a disaster because casinos are built so they could never run out of power because of all the problems they would have of the slot machines and all the gambling revenues and everything would be a disaster without any power. But in fact, that did happen. They somehow hit the main power grid. It was 3 days before they were able to get it going. And what they had to do is they had to make hundreds of these accidental disclosure forms because, of course, Nevada Power didn't know anything about this. This was all secret test site stuff that was going underneath Las Vegas, and nobody knew anything about it. But they had to disclose some of it in order to get it fixed, and the Bellagio came online about 3 days later, and there was never any official explanation for why the power went out. But in fact, it was this another edition of this super high-speed maglev train that goes up to Sandia.
Okay, let's talk about something that, well, this is preaching to the choir to a lot of ufologists, but hey, it's never going to get old. Roswell. In my interview with Stan Freeman, I gave him the floor in the second hour, for the most part, to talk about what he knew about Roswell from a evidence that you can prove standpoint for the most part. But to this day, there seems to be a little debate over what the extraterrestrial entities were actually doing when they crashed at Roswell. There is the theory posted by some that the extraterrestrials that crashed at Roswell, they were from the future, and they were traveling back in time in order to execute a Heisenberg uncertainty principle at a macroscopic scale, so to speak, in order to change our timeline so it could affect their timeline in the future. Do you by any chance know about what the aliens were actually doing when they crashed at Roswell, and are there some things about Roswell that you want the public to know about? Talk about it, please.
Well, what happened was there was a crash, and that was facilitated by the ETs themselves. Now, those were EBEs, and remember, those are just cybernetic organisms. They're robots, and they wanted to give us a heads up on what was available, what kind of technology there was. And Lou Baldwin wrote a book, and I'm trying to think of the name of it right off the hand. He wrote it as fiction, but it's true as what they found, and it's extremely interesting. One of the things they found was that the flying saucers can rebuild themselves. They're intelligent, they're sentient, and if they crash, they can start rebuilding themselves and until they're fully whole again. And that's basically what they wanted to find out. There's none of this stuff that, or I don't believe there's any of this stuff that you were talking about.
Okay, Bill Burns and some other researcher were posting that theory on some video I saw, I think it was on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel. But I guess we will switch gears here. It has been said by some researchers that the reason we are living in a matrix has to do with the moon and Saturn. George Kavassilis has talked about how the moon is actually a ball and chain, so to speak, around Mother Earth's feminine energy, and we call it Mother Earth because it is a feminine energy dominant planet. And other researchers, David Icke has talked a lot about this recently in his talks about how the planet Saturn is a giant broadcasting system, and the rings are actually crystalline, and Norman Berggren has talked about that idea too in his books, and it acts as a giant radio broadcasting system, and the moon amplifies the holographic energy that Saturn broadcasts down to planet Earth to suppress Earth's feminine energy and all sorts of other complicated things that cause us to reside in this matrix. Have you done anything in your research or heard anything about this whole Saturn-Moon matrix idea?
No, it sounds like it might have something, but the main thing is the reason that the Earth is here, and there's hundreds of billions of Earths just like this one, and what happened is we've all lived lifetimes before. Reincarnation is real. We've all lived 25, 30, maybe 100 lifetimes, and in the last, whoever is on Earth or any of these other Earths, they're prison planets, were sent down here to learn how to live with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed, and to learn how to express our love to our families each and every day. And once we can do that, then we get to go to the fourth dimension, which some people call heaven. But if you take and imagine what your concept of heaven is, multiply that by 1,000, that's what the fourth dimension is like. Now, when we die here, you remember Steve Jobs, when he died here about 8 months ago, his family was around his bedside, and just 1 minute before he expired, he went, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." And what he was seeing was a reception area. Now, when you pass away, you go into the reception area, and whoever you believe in meets you. Now, if you believe in God, God meets you. If you believe in Jesus, Jesus meets you. If you believe in Buddha, Buddha meets you. In my case, I believe in the Great Pumpkin, so the Great Pumpkin's going to meet me. But what they do is they introduce you to all the people that you've met in your previous lifetimes, and you get to say hello and hang around for about a half an hour. And then you're taken into a room and you're shown all the wonderful and great and loving things you've ever done in your life, and then they show you all the nasty things you've ever done, and you can't imagine how they would have been able to record this and record even things that you had no idea that anybody would remember. But based on that is the decision of whether you get to stay there in the fourth dimension or whether you're sent back down to Earth to get some more learning on living your life with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed.
Okay. I guess we'll switch gears again, and this is going to be sort of a debunking the skeptics part, because people will always say, how can the extraterrestrials come to Earth if they have to travel all that time and space, and they obviously have to circumvent the speed of light? Well, Bob Lazar talks about how they do that with Area 51, bringing the space to the spacecraft. actually, I don't think we really talked about how element 115 really works. So I'd like you to really get into the science behind that, and also talk about other technologies that extraterrestrials are using to circumvent the speed of light problem to get to planet Earth.
Okay, let me cover that before, because it's real simple. Souls can travel instantaneously from one side of the universe to the other. Now, there is no such thing as a Big Bang. The universe isn't 17 billion years old. It's infinite. There is no end. But element 115 is in the island of stability. It's actually stable. As it goes up 110, 111, 112, 113, 114. 116 is not. So what happens in this antimatter reactor that Bob was shown is what they do is they pump protons into this little triangle. It weighs about 233 grams. It's about 2.5 inches long. It's made of element 115. It's orange in color, and it sits in this little container. And what they do is they pump protons in it until it bumps it up to 116. 116 is unstable. So when it does bump it up to 116, it immediately decays back to 115, and what it throws off is antimatter, and access to the gravity A wave. Now, antimatter is mixed with matter to create heat. And it's used, it goes into a thermionic generator, which creates positive voltage out of heat. And that's what they use to run the saucer. There's two types of gravity A and gravity B. Gravity A works on an atomic scale. Gravity B works on a larger scale. Gravity B is what holds us on the Earth and the Earth in orbit around the Sun. A works on an atomic scale, and what's currently referred to is the strong nuclear force. What it does is when it decays from 115 or 116 to 115, there's a little bit of that wave that they can access and amplify. And there's 3 gravity amplifiers under the craft which can focus into, let's say, 100 million miles away, and they turn on the gravity generators, generates gravity and pulls space. Now, we think of space as actually a nothing, but it only holds one hydrogen atom per square meter, but actually it's a kind of a fabric. It can be pushed and pulled, and you can actually, with exercising enough gravity, you can pull space towards you, wrap it around your craft, and then turn it off, and you're instantaneously 100 million miles away. And this thing can recycle every 12 milliseconds, so you can imagine divide 12 milliseconds into a minute and then into an hour and see that, they can go pretty fast. And there's different ways that you can travel in space. The soul can travel instantaneously from one end of the solar system or the universe to the other. There's other different ways of travel. My father was... in 1927, he formed Motorola with Paul Galvin, and in 1930, he split with Galvin, sold his portion to Galvin, and then started Lear Incorporated. Lear Incorporated became a government contractor, and in 1952, it was the primary contractor for anti-gravity. And they worked for 4 years on it. I think my father was kicked out of the program because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He talked a lot about UFOs. He was very interested in it, but they didn't want anybody to talk about it, so they kicked him out. But I think that everything, we had our own saucers and anti-gravity craft as far back as 56, maybe even a little before that.
Okay. By the way, I did the math once. I remember on some episode of UFO Hunters, some person who knew you and Bob Lazar, I don't remember his name, but he actually mentioned in a fraction of a second how far you can travel with a spacecraft using element 115. I did the math, and I determined, if my calculations were right, that you can get from Earth to Zeta Reticuli in a little over 7 hours. Can you confirm that that is the approximate time it would take to get from Earth to Zeta Reticuli?
I can't confirm that. I came to a much higher number, and I think it was like 34 hours or something like that.
Okay. Either way, it's still convenient to know they have the technology that if only we in the public arena could have that. By the way, I do want to talk about something that has nothing to do with aliens or UFOs, but you did mention in your Project Camelot interview, you mentioned yourself and also a few other people that do not have articles on Wikipedia. Could you please explain to the listeners why you do not have a Wikipedia page and also some of the other people that you mentioned in your Project Camelot interview?
Yeah, I'm not in Wikipedia because it said I had not done anything to warrant being put on Wikipedia. And somebody asked him, what about the 17 world records he holds in the Learjet? He said that belongs to the company, not to him as a pilot.
Okay, because there are some other... All right, because there are some other people that I could think of that don't have Wikipedia articles, like Jordan Maxwell and such. And, actually, Jordan Maxwell, his real name allegedly is Russell Pine. He changed his name for some inexplicable reason. I'm not saying he's a fraud. A lot of people change their names for other reasons. But, anyway.
I don't know why my name isn't there.
Okay. But I guess we'll get back to UFOs again. George Kavaslis, in my interview with him, he talked about how when it comes to what UFOs are, it's a percentage factor. The majority of UFOs are actually of a malevolent nature because they belong to the military-industrial complex. When I told that to Stanton Freeman, he said, well, I think that's crazy because if it belonged to the military, they would use it in the wars. Well, Bill Burns said the reason we didn't use UFO technology in the wars is because we didn't have to, because we could use more down-to-earth technology just as easily. But there are also other UFOs that are not, well, the military-industrial complex ones, Kavaslis didn't really elaborate on what percentage of those belong to aliens and which are strictly human technology. Maybe we can get into that, but he also talked about how other UFOs are from other timelines and other dimensions that are not belong to the military-industrial complex. Can you give based on your research, what percentage of UFOs are what, and specifically what percentage of military-industrial complex UFOs can be connected to extraterrestrials in some way, shape, or form?
All of it. There's nothing we developed ourselves. Everything we've ever invented comes from ETs.
Everything. What about the UFOs that allegedly don't belong to the military-industrial complex? Can you by any chance elaborate on ones that come from other timelines, or maybe are UFOs that are created by the consciousness of Mother Earth?
I don't believe that stuff. I don't believe the consciousness stuff, and I don't believe other timelines. This is strictly Earth. Like I told you, there's millions of Earths, and they're prison planets, and we're sent down here to learn how to live with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed, and it's not more complicated than that.
All right. Also with crop circles, that's also something that Kavaslis said is a percentage factor. You might not believe this, but he said that most of them, some of the crop circles are actually created by the consciousness of Mother Earth. Others are created by secret military and government technology. But he said the majority of crop circles are actually created by extraterrestrials, be they benevolent or malevolent, that want to guide humanity in a particular direction. Some may say, well, that's crazy, but the whole idea is they implant a crop circle that has some sort of a sacred geometry to it, and that sacred geometry affects the consciousness of Mother Earth and humanity at a subconscious level, which guides us in some either benevolent or malevolent direction. Have you looked into crop circles, and can you offer any comments or statements on any of this stuff that I just said here?
No, nothing. Sorry.
That's all right. Not everybody does crop circle research. But one thing a lot of people want to do, but they are too scared to do it, is come forward. And I guess I'm going to ask you maybe to give a little advice here if you can, because I remember in your Project Camelot interview when you were talking about the whole thing about how there was no planes that hit the World Trade Center, they were holograms, and you talked about all the science behind that. Kerry Cassidy said it's amazing a lot of pilots haven't come forward to expose this. And you said, well, a lot of pilots are employed. They can't afford to come forward. Well, someone who's really serious about exposing the truth might have a pessimistic attitude to that statement and say, no, wait, they should come forward. So what if they lose their job? If they lose their job, they can sell drugs and live off welfare. They should go through all the hassle and trouble. And just for exposing the truth and the fact that it will make their life hard, be damned, they owe it to humanity to go through hell and expose the truth. Well, most people would say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to make all the good money I'm making. I don't want to lose my job. Well, as someone who asserted that people will not come forward because they fear losing their job, can you maybe give some advice to people out there who want to come forward but are too scared to do it because of their job and their reputation and all the other things that people fear?
Yeah, don't do it. I lost my job, and it was strictly because of our article that I gave to a reporter who is now working for the Review-Journal here in Las Vegas, and he was working for the Houston Chronicle, and I said, now, if I give you this interview, you don't mention my name. And he said, okay. I said, you can say I'm a current and qualified captain for a major air carrier. And he said, okay, yeah, I promise that. Well, when the article came out a week later, it started out with John Lear, a captain with American Transair, and I was fired 4 days later. And, you know, I was a senior captain then, and I was able to get work, but, you know, it was a problem. And, yeah, I wouldn't advise people to do that. Now, I belong to Pilots for Truth, Pilot for Truth Forum or whatever it is, and they are very careful about what they say. As a matter of fact, the guy that runs it is still not admitting that there were holograms, and he thinks there are real airplanes there, but there weren't. And pilots have certainly tried that in simulators many, many times to come down at descend from 30,000 feet over south of New York. I forget what that beacon is there, and then turn north to the World Trade Center and hit the World Trade Center at the 77th story, dead center of 208 feet wide building. I mean, it's impossible, but you have to take people there and show it to them and let it try on themselves. Even at at the top of my career, I couldn't have done it. Maybe if I'd have been given, a couple of tries, you could line up some of the buildings so that you know where to go, but you're just going too fast. And I'm not sure, are you aware of the 15-page affidavit I wrote for the New York District Court?
I don't.
If not, you should call. It's just called John Lear Affidavit to New York District Court, and explains exactly why there could not have been an airplane hitting the World Trade Center. And it's technically what would happen to the pilot, how he would not be able to take control. It's all brand new instrumentation, nothing ever seen in his life. He's 90 miles away. How is he going to turn the airplane? How is he going to strap himself in? How is he going to get rid of the pilots? Is he going to slit their throats? If so, what's he going to do with all the blood? It's all over the yoke, the steering wheel, and the throttles and everything else. But suppose he does get it in the seat and gets the pilot into the companionway there. He's got to turn his airplane around to figure out how to descend it. It's just too many problems. It just could not happen. But anyway, I wrote a 15-page affidavit supporting Morgan Reynolds' Ketam complaint. And the Ketam complaint was, if the Attorney General doesn't want to file something, that you can file it as a private citizen, which we did, and the judge dismissed it anyway.
Okay, well, a lot of judges, they're being controlled. Even if they don't want to be controlled, they have no choice but to go along with the conspiracy.
Absolutely.
And there was that one judge when they brought up Building 7, she was like, building what? It's amazing how some things can be hidden in plain sight, even though they're not in plain sight. But, right, you remember that, right?
Hilarious, yeah.
Yes. So, but I guess we might as well go back to UFOs again. In regards to specific UFOs belonging to specific aliens doing specific things. I mean, some UFOs, like saucers, you can easily recognize them as Pleiadian if you study the work of Billy Meyer. I've heard other people talk about how the cigar-shaped UFOs, they actually belong to reptilian aliens. I'm going to give you, we've only got about half an hour anyway, but I'd like you to talk about this for maybe 15 minutes at most if you want to talk about it. Specific UFOs, what are they used for, who do they belong to, and all the rest of it. Can you elaborate on that to the best of your ability?
Not really. There's so many different sizes and shapes, and like I say, if anybody wants to read some really good, solid, real, what I consider to be real information, buy some of these books that Lou Bolden has written. They're not very long. Get them at Lulu.com or Amazon.com, and there's 3 or 4 of them, and they talk about real stuff, and it's so real. When I first started reading this stuff on AboveTopSecret.com, I said, this guy knows what he's talking about. I've studied this stuff for 25 years, and this is the first guy I've seen that really, really knows. And he was picked up when he was 5 years old or a little older. He grew up in Italy. His father was the U.S. Army, and he was picked up and continued to be picked up throughout his life and taken all over the universe. And he has so much information that is real. But anyway, some of the stuff, the saucer stuff, he gets into, it explains when we see saucers split into 5 saucers, or 5 saucers go into one, or he talks about once going over to Vietnam, and he was in a saucer, and he had some special forces with him, and he was just there as an observer, and he jumped out of this thing to help these 5 special forces get out, and when he stood on the ground, he looked back, and the thing looked exactly like a Huey helicopter. It wasn't the flying saucer that he had climbed into, and of course, we've all seen that. We're pretty sure it's a saucer, but what we're looking at is Huey helicopters. They can change shapes and portray themselves as all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Let's talk about below the surface of the Earth and above the surface of the Earth. And what I'm talking about is first below the surface. It has been said that there is, well, first of all, the Earth is hollow. The hollow Earth theory is true. There is a higher consciousness race of humans below the surface of the Earth, and it has been said by some people like Sheldon Neidl of the in contact with the Galactic Federation of Light. This is the benevolent Galactic Federation of Light, not the malevolent one that masquerades as a benevolent one. There are 2 organizations like that. But he talked about how the Earth is hollow. There are, in fact, openings at the poles, and there are higher dimensional humans and such living below the surface of the Earth. But in between that, in the crustal area, there are like lots of malevolent aliens and such. Like Alex Collier has talked about how the Alpha Draconan reptilians have created all sorts of underground tunnels below the surface of the Earth. Some other people like Andromeda Council ET contactee Tolek have talked about how in the past couple years that the Andromedans and other benevolent ETs are working really hard to shut down the underground and underwater reptilian bases. In fact, that earthquake we had in 2011 that ended up destroying some of the Washington Monument, cracking it, he said that earthquake was actually caused by benevolent aliens shutting down a reptilian base below the surface of the Earth. Can you offer any comments or statements on underground bases that are controlled by, let's say, malevolent aliens for the purposes of this argument? And do you know anything about them being destroyed recently?
No, I don't. Of course, there are underground bases, civilizations that live below Earth. It's not hollow like a tennis ball, but it does have vast caverns in which these various civilizations live, and there's all kinds. There's not necessarily humans. They some of them look quite different. The reptilians have lived down there, and they've been there long before us. And there's 2 types of reptilians. The reptilians, some of them look identical to us. The only difference is they have an inner eyelid. And a friend of mine worked in a laboratory once with a reptilian, and every time that he would blink his inner eyelid, that was the only thing that he could tell difference with the reptilians. But yes, they have all kinds of different underground civilizations.
Okay, and let's talk about above the surface of the Earth now. I did mention this during the news segment before letting you on about how at least half of the New World Order factions actually do not want to depopulate the Earth. They would actually prefer to microchip humanity so they could take away the free will of humanity, or more specifically, change the free will of humanity to make us use our free will in strictly malevolent purposes. And the whole idea behind that is because the Alpha Draconian reptilians are a galactic warrior race of sorts, they want to turn humanity into a cosmic war machine to further their galactic empire. And as I said, the microchip global population is directly connected with this. Do you by any chance know anything about this whole thing about turning humanity into a cosmic war machine?
No, that's not going to happen.
Well, it can't happen.
We're like as in, pardon?
Well, it's not going to happen, but that's what they want to do. And I'm asking, have you found anything in research that confirms, that is what the Draconian reptilians and other malevolent ET races do want to do, even though they can't actually succeed?
Yeah, they could probably do that.
I could certainly believe that. But let's talk about some other races that are malevolent besides the Greys and the reptilians. Those that believe in the Anunnaki from Nibiru, it is said that they are a malevolent race. I know you said earlier you beg to differ on that whole theory. But other malevolent ET races, George Cavazos told me about how there is a group of ETs known as the Six Lords of Darkness, who are a conduit among all the malevolent things that go on Earth from a spiritual level. They are not connected with the Illuminati. They are strictly metaphysical and such. That's just another malevolent ET race besides the Illuminati. But can you talk about other malevolent ET races that are not either gray or reptilian that you have researched in your research?
Only to the extent that we have no idea how bad monsters can really be. If we think of the monster in Alien, they're 100 times worse than that. And so, they're out there, but the chances are we won't run into them. Now, Lou Baldwin talks about some of the monsters that live on Earth, and Vietnam apparently was a place where they lived or accumulated, and they were moth-type men, about seven feet high. And they could fly, and they were almost identical to what we see as the Mothman, or call the Mothman. And he said they tried to get, they were sent from Okinawa, where they were stationed, over to try and eliminate them. But every time they went there, they, for some reason, they were disrupted. They couldn't do it. But he did say that he was physically attacked once, and the thing started nibbling on his neck, but somehow he got away, and that was all there was to that. But there are some pretty bad aliens out there.
Not just Greys and reptilians, indeed. Well, not all Pleiadians are benevolent. That's something people like to stress. It's not all hunky-dory out there, to quote George Yatsoukas from an Ancient Aliens episode. It's a yin-yang type of thing. But another thing I want to discuss, by the way, we've got about a little over 20 minutes. I want to talk about the NSA for a moment. It used to stand for No Such Agency, but now it doesn't. Well, there were whistleblowers even before Edward Snowden. And by the way, Edward Snowden is not a double agent. Andrew Bartzis, Akashic Records reader, confirms that, and so did some woman who can analyze voices to test sincerity in people. She said Ed Snowden is strictly, from a voice perspective, telling the truth and cares about humanity, so he ain't no double agent. Get that out of your head, people. But I want to talk about the NSA for a moment, because Alex Collier, in one of his talks in, I think it was his 1995 or 96, he was talking about how the NSA, a lot of the technology behind that was alien technology, and he has talked about how the NSA does have bases on the moon, and Alfred Weber of Exopolitics TV talked about how the NSA does have the ability to track and monitor people through our light emissions. We all have our own unique light emission from our body, just like we have our unique fingerprint. We can't see it because it's outside visible light, but it is there. And the NSA, with the use of technology like the Gwen Towers, have the ability to monitor us with our light emissions and such. And Collier, I believe, did say that it is the Orion Greys on the malevolent alien hierarchy that, for the most part, have most of the control of the NSA. What can you tell us about your research involving the NSA?
Nothing. Other than what you've mentioned here, I don't know too much about, other than what Snowden has said. As far as bases on the moon, every time I hear that bases on the moon, I think, all these pictures I've got, there's cities all over the place. What are we going to do? Set up a base on Main Street and Central on one of these cities, or are we just going to pick a cotton field or where they grow crops and set up a base there? Or what's the deal? It's this isn't a place where we could just build a base. I mean, there's the whole civilization. There's 500 million people that live up there.
Yes, and well, you know what? Speaking of the moon, we got to get back to the whole thing about Richard Hoagland, because in that presentation I watched on Project Camelot, one of the questions that Bill Ryan asked him was, Richard, well, a lot of people say you definitely have hold of a conspiracy, but you got a hold of the wrong one. And Hoagland is of the opinion that the video shots on the moon were real. I mean, I do have enough respect for Richard Hoagland to the point where I asked him to come on my show, but then again, he kind of pisses me off with the fact that he tries to debunk any notion that we have bases on Mars. And Alex Collier once said that Richard Hoagland told him that the reason he won't tell the world that the moon is artificial is because he isn't ready to tell humanity, because he thinks humanity can't handle the truth. In regards to Richard Hoagland's work of the bases that he says he's seen on Mars and the structures and all, can you say he's got it all wrong, or do you think he's got some things right there?
He's got it all wrong. There's a civilization on Mars. There's civilization. There's 5 or 6 different, maybe even 10 different civilizations on Mars, both above ground and underground. There's plenty of air there. We're told all that stuff by NASA that there's no air and it's too cold and all that. That's just BS, that they feed us. But there's a lot of people that live on Mars. I don't know whether we've been there or not. We may have. Sasquatch, incidentally, comes from Mars. Now, what they're doing here, I don't know. But he, Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever you want to call him, he does come from Mars.
Really? That's interesting. In one of his question and answer sessions, Andrew Bartzis talked about how Sasquatches are actually higher density beings who are taking the form of an ape-like creature. He didn't explain why they take the form of an ape-like creature, but I'm assuming it's because humans can relate to that, and he says the whole purpose behind them doing that is to wake up humanity to the idea that, yes, there is paranormal activity, it is real, and here's Bigfoot to show you. He didn't talk about anything involving Sasquatch on Mars, but since you mentioned that, please talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, it's not much to talk about. That's just where Lou Baldwin says they come from, and we've talked about, how they could possibly travel or what the deal is, but that's about all I know.
Okay, and let's talk about bases on Mars for a moment. First of all, there was a Project Camelot TV series that got canceled after one episode. Gee, I wonder why. And that one episode was about Mars, and it was actually supposed to air before the presidential primary, I believe, but they waited until after Obama became president because they talked about in that episode about how Andrew Basiago, whistleblower on time travel and Mars technology, went to Mars with Obama as part of his secret space program. I think it was in the early 80s, and they didn't want people to see that until after Obama won his second term. And in that episode, they also talked about how the sky on Mars is actually a baby blue color, and it's not the reddish color we're led to believe. It more closely resembles the desert of Arizona. But others have asserted that Mars, even though it can support life, it is, for all intents and purposes, a planet that is in a coma, and it's not a planet that's easy to live on for humans. Andrew Basiago even said that after there's so little oxygen that after walking around for a while, he had a lot of pain in his legs and such. But in regards to bases on Mars, what can you tell us about that, and also extraterrestrial life that is on Mars?
The part about there not being enough oxygen, that's not true. There's plenty of oxygen there. Yes, it is a baby blue sky, just more or less like Earth. there are plenty of people that live up there, and it should be no problem for humans if we're ever allowed there, or if we ever get there. I don't believe Obama went there, but what do I know?
Okay, and also in regards to the reptilians on Mars, Alfred Weber did once mention in one of his talks that there are reptilian bases on Mars, but the reptilians always masquerade as humans, and he said it has to do with the fact that if humans were to see them, they would be too frightened because their appearance is too frightening. But I don't really know. That doesn't really seem to make much sense in regards to why the reptilians would always want to masquerade as humans. But can you specifically talk about the reptilian bases on Mars and what they're doing up there? Trying to do?
Well, masquerade as humans, they look identical to us. There's just, that inner eyelid difference. Why they would masquerade as us being on Mars, I don't know. They've certainly been on Earth hundreds of millions of years before we ever got here. That's about all I know.
Okay, and what do you know about the reptilians masquerading as humans? Because there seems to be a little bit of a disagreement here as to how they do it. Some people have talked about how the reptilians, they are of a fourth-dimensional entity, and they have the ability to become third-dimensional entities, and when they're third dimension, they put a holographic mask of a human around them. Others have asserted that the reptilians masquerade as humans by attaching themselves to the chakra system of humans because they are an astral entity, and as such, that gives them the ability to attach themselves to the chakras. And those are two basic ways of how the reptilians.
I don't believe any of that. They just look like us.
They look like us.
Good reps and bad reps. There is some difference has to do with a tail, but I don't remember what I knew about that.
Okay, so like Kathy O'Brien in her book Transformation of America, she talked about how she witnessed Father George Bush, and also the then Mexican President Miguel de la Madrid shapeshift into reptilian aliens. What do you think she was seeing when she saw that?
Don't know.
You don't know. Okay, you're not willing to offer any comments on that. All right, I don't think we'll talk about this any further because that's something we've been researching a lot. But definitely something we got to research too in general, a lot of us, because there are a lot of unanswered questions about this. But speaking of unanswered questions, in your when you appeared on an episode of Brad Meltzer's Decoded and talked about the people who were talking to the people in that episode who were doing the research for Brad Meltzer, they asked, how can the government hide all this? And you said the government is very good at keeping a secret. You don't know what you don't know. Well, first of all, a lot of people will say, well, the government is not keeping a secret. The evidence is out there. The problem is that humanity, to a great extent, is just too paradigmatic, too fearful, and too flat-out stupid that they will refuse to believe something shocking or disturbing, even if the evidence shows they have no choice but to believe it. I mean, others would say, well, the government can keep... Well, I know I pissed off a lot of people by saying that, I'm sure, but hey, if it'll wake up the sheeple, then fine. But another way that people say the government can keep a secret is very simple. If someone wants to play the role of whistleblower, the government will come up to them and say, hey, we're going to murder you and your wife and kids if you don't shut up. Is that understood? Well, those are two ways of the government keeping a secret. Death threats and actually killing people, and also the people of planet Earth will not believe what they don't want to hear. So
yeah, exactly. And then when they go to the guy, they say, when they give him a clearance, they say, look, we know that sometimes you're at a party and you may accidentally say something that you shouldn't have, and don't be worried because we're not going to hurt you, but we'll kill your wife, grandparents, mother, father, kids, parakeet, dog, boxer, and everything else, but you'll be okay.
Okay.
That's how effective it is.
Right, I'm sure it is.
That's how they make it effective.
Right, but another way...
That's why you don't have any deathbed confessions.
Right, but also another way they keep a secret, the so-called Men in Black, that movie series is said to be a form of disclosure in plain sight, and it is not a joke, that whole thing about the guy flashing the light in front of the guy's face to make them forget their memory. Well, there is some truth to that. In fact, some other people have said that the Apollo astronaut missions, they actually had their memories taken away from them. Well, that opens up a whole can of worms in regards to whether or not Apollo actually happened. But in regards to using the Men in Black to keep a secret, what do you know about that?
Nothing.
nothing. It's not something you've looked into. But what about astronauts having their memories scrambled?
Yeah, it was very well done when, Project Paperclip was how the 3,000 Nazis got over here and what happened after World War II, or the beginning of the end of World War II. We could make the bomb, but we couldn't make the plutonium. The Nazis could make the plutonium, but not the bomb. So they came to us when it was obvious they were going to win, and they said, look, we'll give you the plutonium, but what we want is for 3,000 of our SS to be able to come into the United States. And so we said, okay. So we got the plutonium, bombed Japan, and then Allen Dulles, who was director of the CIA, John Foster Dulles, who was chief head of state, and Eleanor Dulles, who was their sister, was head of the Berlin desk. Between them, they're the ones that got the 3,000 Nazis into the United States. And of course, what they did is they took over NACA, which became NASA, and they always ran NASA, and still do. And they started taking over some of the major corporations. So that's how that started.
Okay, might as well talk a little about that in regards to the whole extraterrestrial connection to Nazis. I believe the Nazis, and specifically the Vril Society, believe that extraterrestrials from the star system known as Aldebaran played a great role in the technology of the Nazis and the UFOs and such, and also maybe the Foo Fighters. One of the rare occasions where we did use UFOs in the wars, they, I believe, were said to come from Aldebaran. I can give you about 8 minutes. If you want to close on this subject, talk about it to the best of your knowledge and ability, the whole connection between extraterrestrials, UFOs, and Nazi Germany.
Yeah, it's Aldebaran.
It's all what?
It's pronounced Aldebaran.
Aldebaran. Okay, thank you for correcting me on that one. So talk about this, please.
Yeah, well, what do you want me to say? It's all true. It depends on what, how far you think it's gone. The guy wrote a tremendous book here, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, which traces a lot of that stuff, and it's not over. It's growing.
Okay, since we got enough time for another subject, we talked about different groups of malevolent extraterrestrials. I guess if you want, we can close on the subject of different races of benevolent ETs. I mean, you got the extraterrestrials on ET councils like the Andromeda Council and the Galactic Federation and such, and there's also the Pleiadians of Billy Meyer lore, and other people have talked about how most, not all, but most dolphins and whales are actually a form of benevolent extraterrestrial entity that have come here to raise the consciousness of planet Earth. Can you tell us what you know about different groups of benevolent aliens and what their intentions are? You got 7 minutes if you want to talk about this.
I don't have 7. I can't talk for 7 minutes on that. It's just that, like I said, the benevolent ETs, the ones who made us, are the ones that are running the show. They made us. And what we're doing here on Earth is, again, learning how to live our lives with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed. And each day all of us get challenges thrown at us, bills that we have trouble paying, accidents, health problems, all that. All of those are just planned challenges. There's no such thing as accidents. Everything has a reason. Everything has a plan. It's all, was planned hundreds of thousands of years ago. And this is these are the challenges we have to learn to deal with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed.
Okay, and speaking of consciousness raising and all, and how the benevolent aliens are trying to do that, in my interview with Alfred Weber, he talked about how Fukushima is in fact a global extinction event, and even though benevolent ETs are trying to keep the amount of radiation in check, so says Tana Sunfire, who's the contactee of the Galactic Federation of Planets. The ETs on that council say they are trying to keep the radiation in check. In the end, it is still a global extinction event, and they are trying to prepare us for a great consciousness shift, and they are abducting, and I use abducting in a benevolent sense here, abducting like indigo children and star children and tampering with their DNA, the benevolent aliens are, in order to help humanity have this consciousness shift, which Alfred Weber says, and also Franco De Nicola, A Unified Soul. When I had him on my show, he talked about this, how late 2017 or so is when planet Earth will ascend, for lack of a better word, into fifth dimensional Earth. And the main reason for this is we got to get out of Fukushima. What is your take on this whole thing?
Absolutely not. Fukushima was simply the fact that the Israelis had won the contract to run all 52 of Japan's nuclear generators. And then they found out that Japan had been selling high-grade plutonium to Iran. So they set off an atomic bomb 120 miles northeast of Fukushima, and that set off the tsunami. There was no earthquake. As you can look at any video of Fukushima and see that nothing is shaking. It's just the water that's causing the damage. And the Israelis did that just because they caught Japan giving the Iran plutonium.
Okay, you've actually opened up a big can of worms there, because in my interview with Alfred Weber, he talked about how they have identified the HARP system, not the one in Alaska, but it was another HARP system, which caused the earthquakes that caused Fukushima. And we also talked about how the bombs that got set off in Fukushima were actually cameras masquerading as bombs, and you could tell it was set up because the explosions happened at maximum capacity. So I hate to burst your bubble.
No, read all of Jim Stone's stuff on that. He has a real good background and also a good website on that. It's not the HARP system.
Okay, I'd love to see you and Alfred Weber debate that. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. I can give you 3.5 minutes. I know it isn't a lot of time, but I do remember seeing something on your website, the Real John Lear website, that you do have did some work on chemtrails. You got 3.5 minutes if you want. What are the important things that you can tell us about chemtrails and what we should know about them?
Nothing. I don't know anything about chemtrails, and
really?
I wish I did, because a lot of people ask me on that. But nope, sorry, I don't know anything about it.
Well, maybe now you know why, because on that website, The Real John Lear, which people can contact you from, it does say that you have done some work on chemtrails. Are you aware of that website, by the way?
I'll have to go and look and see. There's so many John Lear websites there. I don't have a chance to look at all of them.
Yeah, this was therealjohnlear.com, and it did say something about chemtrails, so I'm glad I was able to bring that to your attention. I hope they're not spreading disinfo about you, but I was able to contact you from that. Funny thing is, when the email I sent, the mail to you was John at @therealjohnlear, but whenever you responded from your @cox.net email. Right, so I guess whoever made that website, I don't know, do you have any idea how they were able to reach you through that website, even if it's not your actual website like that?
No, I've heard about the thing. I'll have to call up some guys and see what's going on.
All right. Well, I'm glad I was able to tell you about that. So
yeah,
I guess we might as well draw this episode to a close, because I'm only got 3.5 minutes on the clock, but I'm going to close by telling you the same thing I tell all my guests, John. Even though you're brilliant and intelligent and fascinating enough to have on my show again, one of the goals on my show is to try to get as many different people on the show as possible before I give any one specific guest double dips. So even though you are a fascinating individual, there are a lot of other fascinating individuals on planet Earth who deserve some glory on my show, so I wouldn't expect a call from me again to come on my show anytime soon, because there's a lot of other people that get a chance.
Sounds good to me.
Fairest way to go about it, right? But it was a pleasure having you on. I do hope this, I will upload this interview to YouTube so this information does get out, and I'll try to spread it like wildfire, even though you did obviously beg to differ on a lot of things that I've brought up as I did address in this interview. I'm sure that people can use their own discernment and judge to see what is true. And I love exposing contradictions. It's one of the things I love doing on the show, to expose the nature of reality. But John,
well, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, too. Well, John, namaste, take care, and good luck on the rest of your research.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Folks, that was a brilliant interview. Controversial, certainly, because of all the contradictions we discussed, but still, I hope you got something out of this. Next week, I am actually scheduled to have Jay Parker on, but to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what he presented. The only reason I contacted him was because I saw that he and a lot of other people had done presentations at the Free Your Mind conferences in Philly, and as part of my mission to get many different people on this show, I decided to contact all the people who did presentations at Free Your Mind, and I did see his presentation, but off the top of my head, I don't remember what it was about. But I guess you can check that out on the Free Your Mind YouTube channel that does show all the presentations in Philly in both 2011 and 2013 at those Free Your Mind conferences, and Jay Parker did a talk on that. We'll talk about what he discussed in that presentation. I'm probably going to have to review it again so I see what it's about. But we'll talk about that and other things that are worth discussing. So Jay Parker next week. Without further ado, namaste, everybody. Take care and enjoy the rest of your life throughout consciousness.